Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. in Switzerland, it's Space Café WebTalk time. Our Space Café WebTalk, 33 minutes with Niklas Hedman, will begin soon. Thank you for joining us for this very informative and definitely inspiring event about the new frontier and space multilateralism. As always, we really appreciate your participation and your ongoing feedback. I'm Torsten Kriening, your host today and publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. We are a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I think many of you already are familiar with our website, bi-weekly newsletter, daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. This morning, we are very proud. We released episode 7 of our podcast on all major platforms called Nahum Romero, What the Space Industry is Missing and Why Not Even Elon is Visionary Enough. Check it in or check it out. If you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our website in the event section and now on YouTube as well. We host our Space Café web talks on a weekly basis, and this is already the 17th edition. I hope you mark Tuesdays at the same time in your calendar. Today, I'm very honored to be joined by a great and a very special guest, also from the north, like Jenny last week. But working out of Vienna, it's Niklas Hedman. Niklas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Torsten.
Niklas is Chief of Committee Policy and Legal Affairs Section of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNOOSA. He serves as Secretary of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, UNCOPUOS, and its Scientific and Technical Subcommittee and Legal Subcommittee. He is the Secretary of the United Nations Interagency Meeting on Outer Space Activities, UN-SPACE, which is the central coordination mechanism for space-related activities in the United Nations system. He is responsible for the Office Capacity Building Program in Space Law and Policy. Before joining the United Nations in 2006, he worked in the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, particularly in the areas of ocean affairs and law of the sea, space law and space policy, as well as disarmament and non-proliferation, including PAROS and the Hague Code of Conduct against ballistic missile proliferation. He's a member of the International Academy of Astronautics and the International Institute of Space Law, ISIL. He received the IISL Distinguished Service Award in 2017, and he serves as the Vice Chair of the COSPAR Planetary Protection Panel. I'm very proud to welcome you, Niklas, in my show. Niklas expresses his views on his own behalf, just to mention that. So, let's start it. To start our talk, and I read out what your position are, but what are you doing? And what is HOSA and UNCOPUOS? How does it work together? And it might be a naive question to start with, but I think it's not just me who have this question from time to time. Niklas.
Yes, Torsten, thank you. Indeed, I think it's quite important just to set the state of affairs. And we are using acronyms in the UN system, as we all know, and they can be quite confusing. So COPUOS stands for the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And that is an intergovernmental body that was permanently founded in 1959, and it operates with 2 subcommittees. And we will go into that later, so I don't explain that later now at this stage. But UNOOSA is the Office for Outer Space Affairs, and that is a United Nations entity. The Office for Outer Space Affairs serves the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. So we provide substantive secretariat services to this intergovernmental body and its 2 subcommittees. But we also perform other activities like capacity building activities. We also try to foster a dialogue between governments and private sector and academia on several areas of the space agenda. And I would also like to mention that UNOOSA has a delegated authority to discharge the responsibilities of the Secretary General of the United Nations under the legal regime of outer space. So the treaties and principles, in a nutshell, they contain obligations vested with the Secretary General of the United Nations to take action, and that is then handled by this office. So the most prestigious, I would say, and important function there is to maintain the international register on objects launched into outer space under the Registration Convention. So that is just in a nutshell, the difference between those two entities.
Yeah, that's all clear now. Easy thing. So while talking with Jenny Tapio last week, she mentions the current stop dialogue is a very big issue for the member states, for the participations in the dialogue. How has this present COVID-19 pandemic affected COPUOS and its subcommittees? I think there's no one better than you than to clarify the situation.
Yeah, thank you. This is really an important, but also quite a tricky question, because obviously all intergovernmental bodies in one way or the other has been affected by the present pandemic. And as we have to know, the pandemic is not over. Although in Vienna, at the Vienna International Center, where we host all meetings, intergovernmental meetings under the Vienna chapter of the United Nations, so to say, we still now can go back, I would say, to normal business, but that is far from the truth in the rest of the world. So obviously, COPUOS, its legal subcommittee, has really taken a big hit. We managed to complete successfully the session of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee, because that was in February, so it was before the lockdown. But the legal subcommittee session was scheduled for April and COPUOS in June, and obviously we had to do something. So we decided to, for safety reasons, we decided to cancel the full sessions of the legal subcommittee and COPUOS. So that was really a hard decision, and we were in constant consultation with member states and bureau members, and we arrived at a scenario where we really need to focus on what is needed for allowing the General Assembly later this year to take decisions to, I would say, mandate the Committee of the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space to work next year. So we really had to be careful in designing this. And there is a lot of frustration. There's a lot of frustration among states, because we have, as we all know, quite an extensive agenda spanning over all areas of space activities, from what space can do and deliver in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, that's just one example, climate change, water management, etc., over to items dealing with space weather, near-Earth objects, and of course the entire bulk of items under the legal subcommittee agenda, where we have space resources is one of the most, I would say, catchy items at this stage, but also space traffic management. And there is a lot of frustration out there that this situation we face now has created a vacuum. It has created a vacuum in the intergovernmental dealings with those quite hot topics. And for that reason, yes, multilateralism, as we see it at the intergovernmental level, is in a state of a vacuum, and that is quite a good expression, I would say. And as Jenny said, you referred to her view. Yes, there is a frustration in this effect, because, and I would like to say that also, because the space activities as we see them during this pandemic period, there are activities going on, and individual states are planning for space mission and for policy also determination in the space agenda. And what we saw earlier this period, of course, we have the presidential executive order on space resources, President Trump. We also have the Artemis Accords now being formalized. And we had a tremendous success in the launching by SpaceX of astronauts to the ISS during this period of the coronavirus. So this is a frustration of member states that they cannot debate this, they cannot discuss this intergovernmentally at the body of the global level that really counts when it comes to those areas of space activities, namely the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and its subcommittees. So there is a frustration there.
I see, and I see your points. And I mean, let's pick up on the topic what we mentioned in the title. Can you elaborate? What do you mean by the new frontier? Is it included that activities you just mentioned, or and in general term, what is the link to space multilateralism? And by
Yeah.
the way, it's a super hard word for me to just speak out.
Yeah,
Maybe it's deliberately chosen.
yeah, you're not alone. It's a difficult word. Yes, of course, the new frontier. I mean, it's a term I just came up with because it is catchy. It indicates that there's something new coming. There's something new coming. Of course, it's also a loaded word. The new frontier is something that some people associate with the colonialism, etc., and that is not the intention here. It is to mark that we are facing a situation where we are expanding our space efforts into areas where we have not really been before. So that was the reason why I wanted to choose a term that is catchy in this regard. So basically, what we always have to remember now when we are talking the future of space activities is where we have come from. And the development of space activities over the past 60 years, because it's the 60 years time span that we really are talking about. And what we all know is the technological advancement in space activities tremendous. What was space activities from a technological basis way back when UNCOPUOS was created is absolutely not the same today. It has overcome really, all those hurdles of technological development over those years. So we see a completely new way of doing space business today than before. And also, of course, when you look at actors, what was earlier, in the earlier days, was something I would say only for governmental activities. Today, we have a very strong push for, I would say, private and commercial actors in space affairs. Industry, obviously, but also from other side of the private space sector. And academia is also becoming stronger and stronger, and we see that the civil society is actually getting a voice when it comes to space activities. Now, this is all leads up to what do we need to do in the future to uphold multilateralism if we want to uphold multilateralism. I believe in multilateralism, and I believe in intergovernmental structure in dealing with the future of space activities. So if we want to do that, we need to look into what are the challenges and what do we need to really observe. And here comes the new frontier. And if I may just explain this quite briefly, what I mean more in concrete terms. So we always talk about outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies. So that is the catch-all term about space activities beyond the atmosphere. In the future here, in the next 10, 20 years, if we make a 20-year mark, in governance terms, and we will come to that a little bit later in my talk. But if we look at the next 10, 20 years, we probably need to be a little bit more concrete in separating between what we really mean here. So we look at different environments, and I'm not talking environmental considerations and concerns and protection in this regard. I'm talking just, as environment. And there we have first planetary environment. So the moon and celestial bodies. And here we include asteroids, obviously, which is really something that is going to be tremendously focused on in the future, not least from a space resource context. So what do we see there? Well, we have exploration and innovation, obviously. That has been going on for many years, but there is a push now for exploration and innovation, obviously. Also for utilization and presence. I mean, geopolitical context, the presence and governance interests on the moon and other celestial bodies will probably also grow. And obviously, the utilization and exploration of space resources is something that has been being debated at the intergovernmental level for some years, but it is also going to be given a real push in the next 10 to 20 years. And of course, with this come then environmental concerns and considerations. for various perspectives, also including cultural protection of cultural sites, for instance, on the moon, most predominantly. And also in all this, we have to consider planetary protection. And just to make very clear that in this talk, I'm focusing on the intergovernmental body UNCOPUOS, but when it comes to planetary protection, it is governed by COSPAR, which is a non-governmental organization. It's not associated with UNCOPUOS as such, formally speaking. So COSPAR is dealing with planetary protection, which is the way of dealing with harmful contamination, biological contamination of celestial bodies, but also in return of sample returns and backward contamination of the Earth. So COSPAR is dealing with that. And so there's a different governance structures when it comes to that particular area. So, as I said, one area here is the planetary environment. I think we need to distinguish that from the space environment if we limit the space environment in looking into the orbits around the Earth. So the classical way of really performing space activities, where we send space objects in orbit to do different tasks, communication, Earth observation, navigation, etc., that is something that has to be separated in a way in how we develop governance regimes, in my view. So we look at orbits. Of course, the most prominent instrument and the newest instrument, I would say, is the long-term sustainability guidelines adopted in 2019. So as many of us know, in UNCOPUOS in 2019, those guidelines, 21 guidelines and a preamble were adopted. And there is still now work to be done in order to develop it further. But still, those 21 guidelines, something that we need to focus on in the coming years in order to really foster the safety, security, and sustainability of how we use orbits and how we perform space operations. And lastly, we have to look at the Earth environment, because what affects in space activities, but also threats and hazards from outer space, affect planet Earth. And there is also, something that might need a different governance, I would say, set up in the future. And there we talk planetary defense, near Earth objects, obviously. Also planetary protection, as I said, because there is a backward contamination risk, obviously. But space weather and also astronomical issues like the dark skies of light and sound pollution from space activities. So 3 distinguished areas that are all interrelated, but where I think it will be need in the future, in the next 10, 20 years, to really look into what is necessary to protect and what is necessary to observe individually in those areas, because they are really not the same and they don't require the same governance structures. And then, of course, it's all about order. It's all about order. It's all about how we foster a governance structure so that we can continue using our assets in outer space. We can continue exploring other celestial bodies, and we can continue using space technology for the benefits of planet Earth. But we need to look into the interests of various space actors. And there will be, if I may use the word, not a conflict of interest, but competing interests. And we will see increasingly the competing interests of governance, commercial, and scientific. So these 3 areas, these 3 pillars, will in a way compete in the future space activities under this new order, if I put it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, we had this mentioned by a number of our speakers in the web talks here, or also on our website on SpaceWatch.Global, that is an issue. And I mean, we're talking to all parties, to the academias, to governance, and to, of course, private actors, to understand their viewpoints, and they have all their relevance, as you said. One thing I'm interested in, when we had our previous chat to go into that, you mentioned the 60 years of UNCOPUOS. Working on that for 60 years, working very successfully.
Yeah.
Help me with, why does it matter? I mean, it's history, but we are living in the present. So and want to have a future. And why is it important?
Well, it is important because this is the prime intergovernmental body dealing with space affairs, the peaceful uses of outer space. I'm specifying here it's the peaceful uses of outer space we're dealing with. And this body, it was founded in 1959 as a permanent body and had an ad hoc status since 1958. So you see, it's really the year when everything started. If you look at the governance phases of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space since the beginning, what is so striking is to note that it's 20-year marked phases. So the treaties, the 5 treaties on outer space, they were developed between 1960 and 1980. It's interesting to note the 5 treaties. Then came another phase, 1980 to 2000, we had the adoption of the principles, those 5 sets of principles that are not legally binding instruments, but they nevertheless have a lot of robustness built in them, but they are not legally binding instruments. And then 2000 to 2020 came an era or a phase where we concentrated on General Assembly resolutions and guidelines. And I mean, among the guidelines, of course, we have the space debris mitigation guidelines of UNCOPUOS, we have the safety framework for the use of nuclear power sources, and now from 2019, we have the long-term sustainability guidelines. But an era where we really looked into implementation of the obligations and rights under the legal regime of outer space and developing non-legally binding instruments. The question is now 2020, and in the next coming 20-year mark, if I put it that way, what will we see? Because if you look at the trend from 1960, it is a trend that is going away from legally binding treaty making. And it's important to know that the legal subcommittee of UNCOPUOS is vested with treaty making. It is a treaty making body. So UNCOPUOS is a political intergovernmental body with 2 subcommittees which are equally political, formally political intergovernmental bodies, and the legal subcommittee and UNCOPUOS has treaty-making powers. So very often we hear that UNCOPUOS is slow, it's a slow mechanism, it's a discussion forum only, and I don't agree with that. I completely disagree with the fact that it's only discussion. No, it is a political decision-making body we're talking about here. The slowness of UNCOPUOS, yes, of course, you can say that it took 10 years to form the long-term sustainability guidelines. Fine. But where else outside of UNCOPUOS would it have gone faster? Question mark. So it is the will of states, if states, parties to the treaties, to the international legal regime, and members of UNCOPUOS, if they want something quick to be done, then fine, it is so decided. But if there are political issues and concerns, it takes a longer time, obviously. So intergovernmentally speaking, in the legal order among states, UNCOPUOS is not slower than any other body under the United Nations, if I may put that way. I had to say it because I often
that's a good one. I don't comment on
that. There are reasons for being slow or being fast. It depends, you see.
I got it. I love when you're saying that the 17th were a good time for start something new and something substantial. So that's great. That feels good. But I mean, this slowness, and with that I'm heading over to a few of these questions that came in from our audience. I mean, I understand the slowness in a consens or a related discussion forum to bring things forward. But I mean, we face a situation that at the moment we do have commercial companies reaching out or to space, near Earth orbit, or to the moon or asteroids. Let's leave it for a moment. And how does that fit in? I mean, can the governmental regime still cope with it? Because I mean, if Elon, if Jeff Bezos or whoever puts in the money, gets the stuff up there, as you mentioned, during the period of time of it still stand at COPUOS. So they set facts. And I mean, we had these discussions, and we will have the discussion further on in some web talks. How does a potential governance system for the moon may look like? That everybody is included, not just involved, but included in that. Is that just a fiction?
Well, this is a very, very complex question, just to say, because so that's why you're asking it, I know. So I will try to give you a short answer here. It is important to note that, I mean, under the treaty, so if you're a state party to the Outer Space Treaty, and we have 110 states being states parties and all the major spacefaring nations, I mean, they have international responsibility for their national activities, Article 6. We don't have to go into the details, but it's very important, it's fundamental, because it's up to those states then to make sure that their subjects under international law, private companies and actors under their jurisdiction, that they abide by the rules and regulations set by the state. So they have a responsibility vis-a-vis other state parties to the treaty. So this is the order. It's not for the intergovernmental body to pinpoint on individual implementation of states. It's up to the state to implement their obligations and right under the treaty. So I just wanted to make that point clear. Now, when it comes intergovernmental platform, obviously it's for states. The only decision-making powers intergovernmentally are governments. And that is crystal clear, and that will probably not change. No, that is the order that is established, and it will continue. But what is important in this regard is to allow a dialogue between governments and other actors, intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, industry, private sector, academia, and civil society, to foster a dialogue. And there are various means that can be done, of course, outside of the intergovernmental platform, like what we do in UNOOSA, where we constantly organize conferences and workshops and meetings in that regard to foster that dialogue. But I was thinking that we could also probably move in the future. I'm not saying we are there now, but maybe in the next coming 10 years, and I'm using now the 20-year mark phases here, so we have time, if I put it that way, that we could probably look into other governance system like the ITU, where they have their sector membership, where they actually have recognized certain actors from also commercial and private to be associated with the intergovernmental platform, not for decision making, but to be associated in terms of dialogue and foster, better cooperation and coordination. So that is probably something that could be interesting in an area like space activities, where we know now that there is a lot that will happen in the next coming 10, 20 years. The new frontier, as I said, it's there around the corner, if I may say, a corner being 10, 20 years ahead. But still, we need probably to do some changes in the way that we communicate also at the global level.
Got it. I picked one of the questions here from Simon, and I think it's a very straightforward question, and as we are sitting here just on my virtual terrace and having a chat or among friends, I think I can ask this. Simon Drake asked that, does commercial companies try to lobby in COPUOS?
My straight answer is no.
Okay.
Honestly speaking, there is no such contact in any attempts of lobbying with the Secretariat. That's obvious, nothing. And we don't see any such lobbying activities during our sessions. Private sector actors, commercial and private actors, they can attend, be in the room, provided that they are members of a national delegation. And of course, there is a lot of discussions then obviously going around in corridors, etc. But there is no active lobbying that we are aware of. No.
Good. That's a straight answer. Last year, I had the chance to interview Andre Rippel on one of the example of governance projections, so the 21 LTS guidelines as the latest achievement of COPUOS, as you mentioned. But what is next? So, and how is that linked to things like a space traffic management? What I think is one way, at least, into a coordinated and ordered future.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question, and I also have discussed that with Andrea at various times. I will try to do a very, very brief explanation of what I see, in particular, the way towards space traffic management. But mark my words, the new frontier requires different perspectives outside of space traffic management, because, as I said, we have different environments: planetary environment, orbital environment, and Earth environment to consider in this new scenario, where there is a need to look into different governance regimes like air, maritime, also the deep seabed, frequencies, Antarctic treaty regime, maybe also cyber in one way or the other. So those already adopted regimes that we see and learn from their experiences, lessons learned, so to say. But when it comes to what I see, what will really be something we will see a development in the next years is regarding the long-term sustainability guidelines. And there are four areas, I think, four pillars that we really need to take seriously. One is really foster capacity building and awareness increasing, how states are going to implement those 16 guidelines. And that is not easy at all, because it is a policy instrument, a definition. So it's very difficult to implement. And therefore, we need capacity building of emerging space nations, and also look into that very carefully at the intergovernmental level, not only nationally. Increased dialogue with private sector, commercial and private actors is necessary. So governments and private actors really need to take this seriously and try to enhance a cooperation and coordination. Thirdly, we need at the intergovernmental level, meaning UNCOPUOS, we need an organized reporting on the implementation of those LTS guidelines, obviously, and need to structure that reporting. And we also need to look into further development of the whole long-term sustainability component. So we need to look into, are there any other issues that we need to observe here to develop this portfolio further? And lastly, we need also probably to look into structured, organized information exchange on space objects and events, meaning all those areas enshrined in the 21 guidelines we see today, where we really try to avoid collisions and foster the safety of space operations. So there is, four areas where we really need to look collectively and in an organized fashion within UNCOPUOS. Now, if we manage this, whether we have a top-down or a bottom-up approach to the development of space traffic management, we will see the fabrics of STM. We will see building blocks, emerging building blocks leading to probably a future STM regime, whether it is an intergovernmental global regime or whether it's a regime at the national level and then just having an overarching structure. So how this regime will look like, I cannot tell, but by doing this in that way, in an organized and structured fashion, we will see embryos for future space traffic management. That is at least my understanding, and also based on my 25-year experience with this intergovernmental body, and see how this body works and how it develops its way of working and working methods.
That's great, and I don't go further because I want to stay with these positive words at the end, and are taking your belief into this system that it will lead us into a sustainable future, and I like that. We have a number of questions from the audience that we couldn't answer. I will send it over to you and ask you to answer them. We will take out the advertisements and the stuff that is not that relevant. So for now, I'm afraid that we have to come to an end here. And even so, I would like to continue this exciting talk with you. But I mean, be sure that we will follow up on space policy and on space law topics on our future web talks and in our magazine, of course. Here are some recommendations for upcoming talks. Niklas, you will be on Thursday again busy with another webinar hosted by the Secure World Foundation on capacity building for space sustainability. I think that fits perfectly into what we just talked about. And we will host a great event together with Serbian Case for Space about cybersecurity and how to protect outer space, and featuring our outstanding speakers there like Daniel Porras, who I think knows what he's talking about. And of course, what a small world we are living in. So our next webinars are on the 28th next week. I have the pleasure to talk with Salam Al-Mari, the Assistant Director General for the MBRSC in the UAE, about their ambitious space program. And for those of you who haven't seen it, yesterday they launched their mission, Mars Mission Hope, or Mars Mission, on their way to outer space now, finally. Good luck with the further progress on that, and I hope we will hear from Salam a few insights. And on 4th of August, it's my pleasure to talk with Chris Johnson from the Secure World Foundation about the multi-stakeholder dialogue, or who is in, who is not. It's called the Lunar Exploration, How Big is the Tent? And on the 11th of August, again, great pleasure to discuss with Ken Hodgkins Our Future Global Space Economy, Quo Vadis. Where are we on that? So all these events are online, are on our Eventbrite already. As always, we would like to hear from you, your feedback, our dear panelists. So please check in with us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up to our daily or our bi-weekly newsletters. Thank you all very much for attending today. And thank you, Niklas, for this really exciting talk and being my guest. And thanks again to the entire team behind the scene for doing their great job week by week again. I hope you will all stay safe and stay healthy. And thanks for joining us. I hope to see you next week. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. So thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye to all.
Bye.